privacy should not be a thing that has to be hard or inconvenient. If we turned what we could do up to 11, everybody would lose their minds because they'd be so frightened about what we know about them. You can not be political, but you can absolutely be politicized. The places that I have come where I would have really liked to have that is crossing the international border, and they're like, please unlock your phone. They record conversations all the time, and they use them to train their AI models. What's that precision of voice and video also going to do as we scream up to this election? And then there's going to be this other feeling as the guy who just sold his company. He's killing our kids. I think it's killing our kids. I know it's killing our kids. I know they're taking their own lives.
Without further ado, my guest, Ryan Paterson.
Ryan, thank you so much for being on the Not A Grayman podcast. We've just marked Memorial Day. You were in the Marine Corps, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much for your service and to everybody who's served this nation. You have a background in mathematics. Then
Correct.
Your career has seemingly taken you to many places all around the world.
30 different countries, last count.
You also had 2 businesses. Now you are the CEO of Unplugged. I'd love to talk about the phone. I purchased this because I'm interested in having secure communications and not being a product, essentially, by having tracking software follow me everywhere. And to the extent that it doesn't become inconvenient, I'd like to be able to, control my data and my privacy and all of that. So can you tell me about what got you to Unplugged, and then why is this such an important technology to have?
So Unplugged came into my life through my colleague and partner, Eric Prince. I've known Eric for about 7 years. We first met in a hotel room as he was visiting for a special family event. He walked into the room literally in a tuxedo and said, "You got 15 minutes to tell me what you need to tell me." And we had been introduced to him. Me and my partner, Todd Huffman, had been introduced to him because of some work we were doing in and around North Korea. And so not sponsored by any government, not under contract, but getting SIM cards, cell phones, bottles of rice into North Korea, and we had some ideas of some other things that we could have done. And so we had that meeting. He said, "Hey, write a white paper." And nothing ever came of the white paper and Eric, and we didn't do any business with him at that point in time. But it did become a concept that we then built out in my previous company, IST Research, and did similar things in other parts of the world to open lines of communication, get things in on local networks, talk to people on the devices they had in their pockets already, surveys, all kinds of things, and think about the tough places in the world, and we've probably been there, and we probably conducted a survey and engagements with the local population there. So September of 2020, I sold IST Research to the Carlyle Group. Stuck around there for a year to help with the transition. We bought a couple other companies in that year, and then that took a bit of time off. And so I took about 6 months off, did a few things, traveled some new places, and I peeked my head up after 6 months and reached out to like 5 people and said, "Do you have any interesting projects that you're working on?" At this point in my career, I wasn't looking to be a president and CEO of anything again, especially another startup. And Eric reached out to me in about a day and was like, "I've got something for you." And so we started interacting that spring. By the summer of 23, I was an investor in Unplugged, working alongside with them. And then they asked me to step in as president and CEO as we start rolling out here in the U.S. And the why it's important actually goes back to some things that we discovered about commercially available information that's purchasable by anybody all over the world. Anybody with a credit card can purchase highly precise data that just ekes off your phone all day. And when I show people the images, when I show people maps, they really get it. And when you just talk about it, that's just the creepy ad that we get, that we know that they're listening, and they deny that they're listening, and then finally somebody said it out loud, "We're absolutely listening, and we're going to provide targeted advertisement for that."
Who said it out loud? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I'd have to pull it up. I published the article on LinkedIn, and it was a third-party marketing company, and they were talking about things, and they actually said it, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the guy said, "Imagine being able to listen to your potential customers' conversations and deliver them advertising in real time about the topics. And he said, that sounds like a creepy Black Mirror episode, doesn't? No, it's not. It's a thing. It's here now, and we can provide it to you. And so, and we, Amazon, Google, Samsung all got caught like saying, no, we don't capture live. We don't capture and record. We use your voice to activate things, and then we send the data over when you're specifically talking to one of our devices. And it just turns out that's not true. They record conversations all the time, and they use them to train their AI models, and they may not be doing it for nefarious reasons, but there just aren't any controls over that data. And
yeah, that's interesting. There are no controls over that data, and like from a regulatory standpoint, the EU is much better about data privacy. What's the holdup in the United States, like when it comes to those issues? I've never really understood that.
I think it's manyfold. One, we just had a reapproval and massive expansion of the FISA bill. Right? It wasn't just, hey, we're going to keep doing Patriot Act-like things. It is, we are going to do it and expand it to where the United States is now saying we can require any provider of technology, information technology that records voice, digits, communications, to provide us information without a warrant. And that frightens the hell out of me. And so when you take those kinds of things, and then, I was looking at the precision with which you can get somebody's pattern of life from their phone in their pocket all the time, you start to combine some of these things together. And 20 years ago, intelligence officers would have paid anything for that kind of access. Now it's available to anybody with a credit card that wants to be a marketer, who wants to buy advertising data because they've got a product to sell somebody. And then now you've got the government also saying, hey, we are absolutely going to require companies to provide us this information when we subpoena them for it. And those start to become a series of things that coming together to me felt dangerous. And also, I've been sort of being taught by privacy folks for a long time, right? So I am not a hardcore computer scientist. You said, a couple degrees in mathematics, which makes me somebody who can talk intelligently about a lot of things, but I'm an expert in none. And it was my very liberal friends from San Francisco that were the first ones to say, hey, this is a big deal. Like privacy should not be a thing that has to be hard or inconvenient. And then they all had things, right? They had their de-Googled. A de-Googled cell phone is not a new thing, right?
Right.
They've been around, but you've then got to root the device and do all of these things. And an average consumer, you mentioned convenience early on in your intro. The average consumer doesn't do these things because it's not convenient for them.
Right. It's a trade-off.
It is. It's an absolute trade-off.
But it's like you have full consent, as well, right? Or not?
You have full consent.
Over your, giving your data over for that
sure.
convenience.
Sure. Yeah. And I would guess there's not a single person out there that has actually read, dissected, and sent to a lawyer the lawyeries that are in the consent forms, that are in the user agreements. We looked at a few of them. My COO found this language from Apple in one of theirs, and we read it 16 times. We're like, what are they saying? And they're saying, we will absolutely investigate your data. We were just going to do it with other people. It was like a triple negative went through this thread of things, and we would not, without your consent or not having a third person do this, collect your data. And then you're like,
well, it's often deliberately confusing, because
100%.
Especially with the convenience aspect, you just want to, access whatever it was that you were getting on your phone for in the first place, and reading through all of the terms and conditions and all of that just becomes an inconvenience to everybody.
It does. And look, I still, I landed here. I opened Waze, I typed in a thing, I didn't have to know anything else, and I got to where I went. That's really convenient, but I am agreeing to give to Waze
your whereabouts.
My whereabouts and, other plans that I might have and kinds of places that I wanted to shop.
Yeah, and, I kind of wrestle with this sometimes because we live in a world that is so connected that even if you don't want to be, it makes it very difficult, just by being a part of society to maintain that privacy.
Yep.
So a couple things kind of popped in my mind when you were talking, and one was about like the capture of conversations and dialogue. Presumably all of that's going into some algorithm that'll crank out, the fact that I'm shopping for a new washer and dryer kind of thing. Like, yeah. Okay. So what about can you use it for nefarious reasons? I'm just thinking with voice recognition, like every time I need to do a transaction or something, it's like, every bank, every card seems like they want to record your voice for voice ID. I always opt out. But is it possible for these voice captures to somehow be used in a nefarious way?
Sure. I think, so one of the things I think is there's not a single piece of technology or thing that's out there that is hyper bad in and of itself. Mm-hmm. The fact is you can combine it with so many different other pieces of information. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So the first thing that they always say is it's 100% anonymous. Like the advertising data that they collect off your phone is only tied to your advertising ID. They couldn't possibly ever find that it was you because it's not tied to your phone number. And I'm like, but it's my exact whereabouts. And so if you know two things about me, you can absolutely figure out which one of the advertising IDs in that sea of data is me. You only need two.
Right.
And I first learned this was my second tour at DARPA. Netflix had put out a thing called the Netflix Challenge, and they were concerned about, because they were providing data about user experiences and the kind of movies that they watched, and they wanted to get the best so they could predict better what to show you, so that you'll keep watching and stay engaged. And one of the winners of that challenge actually figured out that, again, knowing 2 or 3 things that you might have watched, they could find you in this list of 110,000 Netflix subscribers. So Netflix gave that data out to researchers to say, hey, what are the algorithms we can do to do this? And then somebody was like, I could totally find everybody and find out what that anonymous ID is to the actual username. Multiple streams of information get to a place where I can really, you can figure out pretty much anything. And so, in that conversation and talking with some other technical executives at the time, because DARPA was interested in doing research on privacy and how do you keep service members and government members private when they're traveling overseas. Some of the tech execs that we had, I won't name them, but they came in and said, like, if we turned what we could do up to 11, everybody would lose their minds because they'd be so frightened about what we know about them. And that's the case. And that was 2010. So imagine what's happened now. So back to the voice. Years ago, I was a member of a bank that serves a lot of military members, and I woke up in the morning to an email that said, "We've done the transfer you wanted from this account to that account for $9,900." I was like, "What?" I was like, "It's the account that we had kids' funds in," and I woke my wife up and said, "What was that?" What are you moving that over to? And she said, "Wasn't me." Throughout that day, I got 4 more of those phone calls. They caught one as fraud, but 4 times $9,900 left my account in one day. And I was on the phone screaming at the bank saying, hey, shut my accounts down. And they said, well, there's other people that have access to your accounts. I'm like, yeah, she's sitting right next to me. Well, they're voice verifying into your account from 2 different phone numbers. So they knew our phone numbers, so then they can spoof the inbound phone number. That's an easy thing that's been around for a long time. I can make my phone number look like any phone number inbound onto your phone. I had a security clearance, so I was in the Office of Management Budget, OMB's databases about security clearance applications. And on those, you've got to say everywhere you've lived, and somebody who lived there with you, all of your first family members, where they live, their phone numbers, all of those things. And the Chinese hacked that database years ago, and so that's what was happening that day. And so now, if they come in and they layer in the voice verification, so that not only is they're coming in from my phone number, my voice is verified, should fix the problem. Well, no, because now we know that our voices are being recorded. Those databases are then being used with marketers, and there's nothing that would prevent a nefarious organization from standing up and doing it. There's been a few things on extortion too that have come from this, right? So the deep fake technology, they get a few recordings. You can get that from 6 or 7 Instagram reels and create a completely realistic video and audio recording of somebody. And, we've seen it, grandparents getting calls.
Yeah.
Grandma, I'm stuck, I'm safe, I need this money sent here today, and even to parents. So yeah, there's absolutely can be used for nefarious.
Yeah, it's so frightening, the level of technology. And one thing that we did was come up with like a code word to verify that, like, if I ever call you for money, like,
right.
Just in case. Right. It is quite frightening to see like the level of accuracy and how realistic everything is now. It's only getting better. And
what's that precision of voice and video also going to do as we scream up to this election?
Right, exactly. I was just going to go there. I mean, it's hard to be able to validate anything. I mean, even if like there's some technology that comes out and is like, oh, well, actually this was fake, but the impact is already done. The reputation's already harmed, or something of that sort. And then it's incumbent on whoever was harmed to, like, what are you going to do about it? When we look at Scarlett Johansson, with the whole use of her voice
right.
without her consent. And, it's just like the future is going to be questionable until we figure that part out.
Right, the folks that are in the offices that will write the policy, write the regulations, write the laws, I don't feel have a deep enough understanding of the technology. Look, I've come across Congress, members of Congress that do have staff that get into it, and they'll take the meetings, they'll ask the questions, but there's not enough, and the technology's moving so fast that, by the time the law gets done, right, there's already something else that would be, look, marketers aren't stupid. Like, they'll be like, as long as I know the regulation, I'll operate within the regulation, but I still need to get that same effect of delivering advertisements, and then the data's still there. So Massachusetts has a bill in place. Maryland has one in place that's preventing the sale of data, of location data inside of their state. So anybody that comes in there, Google can still collect that data to serve it for the maps and the applications they want, but they're not allowed to sell that on to any third parties, right? So those two laws are coming in there, right? So you were asking, like, when's the U.S. going to get around there? And I think we're starting to see it. I think as it should happen, we will start to see some of these things happen at the state level. Other states will watch those states, look for the impact. Are we killing the convenience for the privacy? Are we striking the right balance? Is it deep enough, rich enough to go? So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think the legislative process is so slow that the technology is just going to end around it every time it comes somewhere, and then we're going to have this patchwork of things that are going to be really hard to enforce, I believe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, you're right. Maybe it's like try to address it from a state level, and then the federal side will kind of catch up.
But if you sit around and spend your entire life hoping that the government is going to take care of you and your needs and your future and your protection and your privacy, then you haven't been paying attention to our government for a long time, right? So there is a bit of responsibility on the user to do things, right? And so we've got an offering that's out there that's a phone, but it's just one part of the solution. There's so much more that needs to be brought in there, and being cognizant of. And I remember hearing this a long time ago, like high school kids being told, "Hey, remember that enter is forever." Right, and how many people, important people, celebrities, congressmen, are we seeing get crushed for stuff that they said when they were 17 years old?
Yeah.
I mean, I was a knucklehead at 17 years old, right? Like, I didn't, and I know I did. I know I said things back then that I'd be mortified if it was recorded and brought forward. It's not how I feel. It's not how I believe. Probably never how I was, but I needed to be cool in that moment, because that was the currency, and the whole enter is forever is real, and so people have to take control of that. And if Eric had asked me to do this project 5 years ago, I would have said no, because I was seeing, and I was working. I've been working with high school kids for years, whether through theater or coaching or a number of different things, and when my children first got smartphones, they said, "Can we get an Instagram account?" And I said, "You can get an Instagram account. I'm going to get an Instagram account. I'm going to follow you. You're going to follow me." I was already getting run around by the kids, because then I learned about the Finstagram accounts, which is their fake account, where they really put the stuff. But I would go around and show dads. I wasn't connected to their kid, but their kid had a completely open profile. Mm-hmm. They had their location turned on, and they had like 1,100 followers. Mm-hmm. I'm like, this is an 8th grade girl from Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't know that many people.
Right.
And then I would open the map. I would say, like, this is where you guys live. That's probably grandma's house. That's where she goes to school. Mm-hmm. Here's where you guys went on vacation. And I would see dads' faces change, but then I'd sort of go back and look from time to time, like,
yeah,
nobody made it right. Nobody made anybody make a change. And
I'm hopeful that apps and other, entities that are focused on protecting our children from those predators start to look into opportunities with like App Suite and other secure phone technology that's out there, because I'm really worried about just all the weirdos out there that will look for those young guys and girls. And it's just such a different world, I feel like we're at the point where, like, me as a mom, I'm like, I remember what it used to be like before having all of this. And then, seeing how the world just cannot operate efficiently without the technology that we have. But then, there has to be some framework around being able to give our children the access to this technology and the ease of the internet and all of that. But then at the same time, also beyond just like making them aware of like, okay, don't share your location, don't share your name, don't share whatever. It's like, no, you have to go really above and beyond that, where it's like you need the hardware to actually protect you as well.
Yeah, there were a lot of people when I started this venture, folks that had been sort of in the DC private equity venture capital world, and I of course went to see all of them afterwards. Some folks were like, "You're doing a hardware play. Hardware's hard." But again, like anybody that's seriously in the privacy world, like if you don't have controls and protections at the hardware, software, network levels, then you don't really have any. Again, I might be able to protect a few things from correct apps, not using certain apps. But again, as we talked about earlier, right? It's never one source of information. It's multiple sources of information, mm-hmm. and our ability to compute on massive databases right now in the world is enormous. The amount of data that can be chewed through is just outstanding, and so it really is a layered approach. And I think you've got to add the personal side on that. But then I also go back to like what are the corporations that are creating these things that are making billions of dollars? What's their responsibility? There's a gentleman right now, and I've been following him on LinkedIn. Paul Rafiel, I think is his name. He had received an offer from Meta to come and be sort of a technical representative on their counter-human trafficking, counter-human exploitation side of things. The month before he was getting ready to start, he was at a conference and he talked about Instagram and these groups that are coming out of, I believe it's Nigeria, and they're targeting high school age kids, and they're sending catfishing messages. They convince a teenage boy, remember that 17-year-old knucklehead, mm-hmm. Like if I'd had a phone and a hot young lady from somewhere else had said send me a thing, I probably would have done it. Then once they get the connection, your entire connection list is public to that person once you accept their connection. As soon as you accept the connection, they can see everything, and they copy everybody's account, and then they start sending them messages.
Crazy.
And so Paul said, hey, there are 5 things that Instagram could do today that's completely in their control that they're choosing not to do. And the first one was that if this is a minor, they have to give specific permission to people to be able to see their address book. But right now, if I make the connection request, as soon as you accept it, you have access to everybody, and they copy it all and then use it to exploit these guys. And so then he's puts this list out, and then a month before he starts, they send him a letter, say we're sending your offer to come work for us.
Oh my gosh.
And Frances Haugens is another one. She was working at Facebook very specifically on protection of minors. She absolutely discovered things in their data that proved to her that the company was intentionally doing things to to hook minors.
Oh, that's horrible.
And so, right, so, there's legislation that can happen. There are decisions individuals have made. There can technology that can happen. The corporations that I think do this are owed some responsibility, right? And then behavior of the individuals all come to play, right? There's no single bullet. We've tried to make privacy as convenient as possible. You got yours in this latest batch. Our phones just started rolling out en masse. We are surely seeing there are some things that, users that are not highly technically savvy struggle with a bit, and we're working to soften those edges every day. And we are a startup. We're a small team of folks putting this together, and you got the email about a glitch we had just the other day, right? So two things simultaneously happened. One was an update of a lot of software. One was human error on a member of our team, and the two of those things collided, and it was not a pleasant last 24 hours. But we are really trying to make it as convenient as possible and allow the user to control this, right? Some of the pushback we've gotten is it's not tightly enough locked down. We wanted to provide offerings that allowed people to come in and sort of pick the level of convenience they were willing to give up, right? So you can download our apps from either one of the stores, our messaging, VPN. If you want to go with that Apple and Google store, if that's your comfort zone, that's fine. If you are already an Android user, you can sideload our entire store onto your phone. They have access to all of those things and not being tracked. And then you can buy the phone, which comes with all of that preloaded, and then a whole lot more. But
yeah, I like that everything came preloaded on the phone. I haven't used Android in a very long time. Yeah. When you're used to an iPhone, it's just like there's a little bit of a learning curve.
Yeah.
Not that I hadn't already used it in the past, but I had to refresh a lot of memories, even things like the swipe up and versus swipe left.
Yep.
I was wondering about a couple of things there. So the actual hardware, so there is no API key, so you can't. Is that right? Like there's no marketing.
Yeah, advertising ID. It's usually called a mobile advertising ID, an MAID.
Okay.
Apple calls it something else. So it doesn't exist on the phone at all.
And so then how are we able to, like, let's say I'm downloading Google Maps or so, like, what's going on? Like, I'm trying to figure out how you guys are still able to provide me with the, the access.
So you won't be able to download Google Maps. You can download Waze though, which is weird. Google Maps does not work on the phone.
So why? What's the difference between Google Maps and Waze?
So it's something that developer put in their phone that requires a level of, so there's on most Android phones, there's the Google Mobile Services, and those Google Mobile Services do things. Some apps will say we won't work if Google Mobile Services is on. Okay. Some apps will say,
gotcha.
Some apps will throw an error and say Google Mobile Services is not on your phone. You hit OK, it works just fine. Now, the mobile advertising IDs are different than that, right? So the mobile advertising ID is a thing that's on your phone, and Apple and Google have given you the ability to block that. But they're still collecting on it. But most of the apps then use the mobile ad ID, and then they use that to then collect your location, and you were like, oh, I want the latest version of Balloon Tower Defense on my phone. And you're a 17-year-old boy, and you say all your friends are playing, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to play it. And then that thing comes up and says, do you agree? And they just go, agree. And way down in there it says, we are going to collect your location data. We are going to sell it to third parties. We are going to do those things. And so those are the things now that, it'll go look for that mobile ad ID, but it doesn't exist, so there's nothing for them to send. The other thing that we found on apps is an app is not just the app that you get. There are also a series of tracker subordinate apps that are built into it. And so I'm going to call out, when I use apps names, I'm not saying specifically they're bad, but you can imagine downloading Spotify. For me, Spotify would seem like maybe not a huge threat to my privacy, right? Yes, they'll know what songs I'm playing. I can choose to create a playlist and share with others. What we found is various apps have tons of other tracker packages built into them that are completely separate from all these other things, and they have their own ability to get at your GPS. They don't need the mobile advertising ID, but they know who you are. And again, if most app developers don't create one app, they create 5 apps. And again, then I've got 5 sources of information coming in, and 100% I can figure out who you are. And so our firewall, you can just slide that little toggle over and you block all trackers, malware, and add ID attempts. You block it all. And we actually had one of our early adopters sent me a note the other day, and he said, I don't know what to tell you, but like the data cost of my phone plan has dropped by more than 25% since I switched to your phone. And so he's not a guy that has unlimited data package, so he sort of pays by the bit. And then like somebody in this one channel we have was like, that can't be the case. And he just posted like his bills. He posted 3 months before and 3 months after. And it sure enough was a 25% reduction in the data. Mm. And I think that's because there is a lot of extraneous data that flows off of your phone. Mm-hmm. My CTO, Iran, was looking at that. He was looking at every connection off of a standard Samsung phone, our phone, and an iPhone. And so that's a bit of research that we're going to have a third party do for us, so it doesn't look like we're cooking our own books. We want to download the same apps, put the same usernames on, travel around with 3 phones, and just understand how many places they're doing a digital handshake. Mm. 'Cause that's it. Like, we just walked in here. I've got my phone. If I didn't have all my stuff blocked, it would absolutely have reached out to this local Wi-Fi network, reported back to that provider that this device with this device ID and this operating system is in your building.
I'm curious about, I read that you guys have like these farms that you guys are connecting to. What is that? What's the reason for that? One of them I read is like a vessel offshore.
Here's what Eric is concerned about. So I think Eric said that in an interview before I joined. His whole concern was the warrantlessness of requiring companies to provide personal information, right? So, we're seeing it now. I sort of led off with a little bit of that the expanded FISA Act. Now, they can subpoena a company to give information about their users, and they can forbid that company from saying anything about it publicly. And they don't have to have established probable cause. So some of the things that I talked about with the different kinds of data that are out there could absolutely be used to establish probable cause. Right? We know it happened on January 6th, right? So a lot of people were on January 6th. My apartment was about a quarter of a mile from there. I absolutely walked up there to be like, what's going on here? And I then went, oh, and I went back home. But like lots of people got data about their phone collection. The FBI didn't even need to get a probable cause and request that from massive amounts of data. They had already purchased it. They had already purchased that data, right? So they're buying this commercially available data that doesn't require a warrant for them to go in and do some analysis on. And, I can imagine listeners that might be from a different bent, like we're glad they all got captured. But when an administration change and laws change, and that's now, show me the location of every phone that has walked by an abortion clinic. Show me the place where anybody has been in a pro-Palestine riots, or anybody that were in the Occupy. The thing is, it's such a slippery slope that they can get it from anybody. They can mandate these companies give it to them. The companies then forbidden to tell the customers that their data was collected, and all the meanwhile they're creating a probable cause affidavit that then they take in front of a judge, and then they can do the deep and serious data collection on you. So the whole, we're going to store stuff offshore, and so so that was not about the VPN. That was like, hey, we don't want to have it be in a place where necessarily that could happen. But at the same time, of course we'll respond to any subpoena that comes our way.
Yeah. Would you have to? Are you headquartered in the U.S.?
We're not. We're headquartered in Israel, and we've got a U.S. arm that just is here for the phone distributions. I've worked with a couple of other companies, and so they've been seeing this coming. They've sort of been the FISA warrants have happened for a long time, right? And they're warrants that are sealed and secret, and so they're developing canaries on their websites, right? And so I don't know if you know the canary in the coal mine analogy, but old coal miners used to take an actual bird and it would tweet, and if the bird stopped tweeting, there's probably methane, and you should get the heck out. And so companies that are struggling with this FISA warrantless subpoenas are putting canaries on their page, right? So the law says you can't tell your customers that you were served, but they can't require them to not say a thing. So they tweet every day saying, it's just a little tweet, they're a chirp. And if that chirp isn't there, then users can assume there's been a subpoena delivered.
Wow. See, I kind of struggle with this a little bit because, like, yes, it is a slippery slope, but then also, I think about like the ethical standpoint. So you don't want to violate the Fourth Amendment. Isn't the collection of this information for national security purposes serving a benefit to keeping us safe? Like, yeah, I just wonder with that.
It is a argument we hear a lot. I remember when, right after 9/11, oh gosh, and speaking of this, there's a great book that I just started reading called Means of Control, and it's about this combination of tech and law enforcement and government, and he sort of starts his book talking about 9/11. That's what we all said. Like, everybody said we had all the information we needed to know those guys were up to no good. And so, yes, we want to collect that. And it was actually my liberal friends from San Francisco that pushed back on that. Like, no, like, just because the data exists doesn't mean, like, my home exists, the papers in my filing cabinet exist, the books that I read exists inside of my home. But just because that information does exist and is knowable doesn't give a law enforcement entity the ability to walk into my house.
Right.
Right. And then there was a lot of laws. So there were some laws about the Fourth Amendment and using third-party assets. So, you and I would have phone calls on our landlines. It would go to the register of the phone company, and they got to a place where they said, well, the phone company can't give up the content of your conversation, but since you're using their equipment, we can make them give up the fact that a call happened on this duration between these two phone numbers on this date. As we just talked about before, you get enough of that stuff together, you start building a pattern of life that then gives somebody the ability to have probable cause. And again, it's national security. We don't want to prevent this. What's a national security threat? Who decides what's a national security threat depends on who's in office, and I don't agree with that, but I'm also not going to give up my First Amendment rights.
Right.
But if all of a sudden now words that I write in a text message between two people are considered hate speech and the company has to give that up, then a probable cause, he said that word, he must be a this or that or another. Now we're going to collect all of his information.
Yeah, right. No, it is. It's such a slippery slope. I'm just trying to get the other perspective, because you hear that all the time. And for the most part, most people aren't political. Most people are just going about their lives and most likely wouldn't have the information weaponized against them. It could be.
I would say talk to a lot of people that were literally there for the rally, had no intentions of entering the Capitol. How that feels.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Ask any 18-year-old girl who travels across a state line to get some help because she's pregnant, and she might decide that that's right for her. And I don't want to get into an abortion debate, but Roe v. Wade has been struck down. States are coming out and saying these things, right? And so you can not be political, but you can absolutely be politicized to make a point.
That's a good point. Yeah, well noted. And, you certainly bring up a good point about just the potential for the information to then become a tool of control under the guise of national security. Because after 9/11, we were all we'll go through TSA, we'll do all of this extra stuff. We're willing to give up the convenience of just walking through the airport, for example, but everyone did it.
You're right. Yeah, I mean, it is a nuanced. It is a nuanced thing that everybody should be able to decide on. I'm happy to continue to have the conversations with folks on all sides of the spectrum. We should give it. I don't think people have any understanding just how much of their private lives are being sold.
Yeah.
Every single day. And one of the things I hear a lot is, hey, like, I don't have anything to hide. Like, why should I care? Like, you don't have anything to hide from whom, right? When you go in a bathroom, do you shut the stall door? Yeah. When you go home, do you lock your door and draw the curtains? Yeah. What are you hiding that from? I just rewatched The Circle. And so this was this creepy movie, and I think it was ostensibly a poke at Apple. Tom Hanks is in it, and this young lady finds out this thing, and she realizes that the companies are doing all of this work on the data, but the company leadership isn't providing any of their data. And she, has this big proclamation like, well, then we should all just make everything transparent. Every email, the private email, even those email accounts that nobody in your family, to include your spouse, knows you have. We're just going to make all of those available for the connection and collaboration, because we all know, we can all figure out what the connections are. Yeah. And then Tom Hanks looks at the other executive and sort of says under his breath, and pardon my language, he goes,
"We're so fucked."
Yeah, it's the people at the top where it's like the rules don't apply.
Correct. Like our Congress members.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about trust. Okay, so like Apple. I certainly have always, especially after San Bernardino and that whole unfolding of like, we can't hand over information from the phone because, like this code doesn't exist kind of thing. So
we don't have that code. That's what Apple was saying. We don't have the code.
Exactly. They were like, there is no code to give. Like there's no back way to get into the phone. And, for me personally, I was like, okay, Apple, I'm supportive of that. It made me trust them more. I think they also did a great job at, sort of riding that that wave of like success in terms of like their reputation in the market of being reliable and secure and all of that. Is the Apple hardware the issue? Is it the apps? And then so what's the difference with UpPhone? When I first went in, I think Firefox was like, the location was on Firefox. And I was like, okay, so I had to go in and like turn off my location on everything.
No, you can turn off your location in one button.
Okay, show me.
On the Privacy Center.
Yeah.
So this button on this side is your Privacy Center. So hold that button down. Here comes your Privacy Center. Okay, so all these things are open right now. So block unsecured Wi-Fi networks, Bluetooth blocked, NFC outbound blocked, your camera is blocked, location-based access is blocked, USB is for charging only, all the data is blocked.
Okay, cool.
Right, so all that's off.
Okay.
Now you just got to remember that when you go get in your car. Right, and so in the next version, we're going to have 3 different clicks that you can do here. So one would be like my daily driver, like this is my life and regular. Yes, I want it to connect to my Bluetooth, all of these things, but. Right, then there might be I'm going through an international border. Well, then I would use the kill switch and separate the batteries from the.
Yeah, I love the kill switch. Yeah. I love that. So that's like unique to UpPhones, right?
So there's a couple other smaller devices. We've seen a couple out there that have a number of different switches. It was actually one of the co-founders, Michael Udelson, came up with that idea. It's like we used to be able to pull the battery out of our BlackBerries. We can't do that anymore. Right. And if you ever turned off your iPhone, when you're turning it off, it says, "Find my iPhone will still work while I'm off." That's because it's not off. Right. It's software off, but it's not hardware off.
Right.
So yeah, you can get at all of those things, and so now here's the firewall, and so here's the ad trackers, and then other things that you can decide to block there if you want. You can do it all the system here, and when we talk about making privacy more convenient, this is exactly it, right? You have to go in right now if you want to do this and control it at every app level, whether on Apple or Google. Like you've got to go in and set the settings for each app, what you're going to allow it and not to do. And you're right, Apple came out, their hardware was good. They used to be the certificate of I'm not going to get hacked because there weren't enough of them out there. Now there are. Some folks told me when I started this, again, my friend Todd, I was out in San Francisco and I was just getting ready to make the decision to write a check, get in, start working with these guys. And he said, I want to drive you through San Francisco, right? And so Apple had just made a big push sort of off of those same things. And they had the billboards, you might have seen the ads, right? And so it's like this camera right in front of it says iPhone, this is privacy.
Yeah, this is privacy, exactly.
This is privacy. iPhone, this is privacy.
And for the most part, someone like me is like, go Apple, you know? You believe them.
Yeah, and then, again, we can go back through some of the articles I posted recently on LinkedIn, but Apple's been, they were the first ones to like start with, do you want to give access to other apps to the data you're using on this app. Because that's another thing the apps do, right? They work with each other. I talked about one company has 5 apps and they're passing information. Like one of them might be, just a speedometer, or one of them might be a silly game, or one of them might be, and they're passing that information back and forth. So Apple came out and says, do you want this app to share any information with any other apps? And the default is no. You have to give it access to do those things. So they had a big push, and then we realized they stopped the mobile ad IDs. They actually took the mobile ad IDs off for a while. They blocked apps from accessing it. Well, what turns out they actually did was they started using Apple IDs, and the apps that came out of their app store were then collecting information on your Apple ID, not the mobile advertising ID.
Oh gosh, that's even more annoying.
And then you see their SEC filings, and they had done $300 million in advertising revenue 4 years ago. I can't remember and then their SEC filing for 2025 was it was going to be $30 billion.
Wow.
That's 2 orders of magnitude increase, and they're not doing that by not selling information about you.
Okay, so then let's talk about cost structures, and models. The first year, I love that you have given access to the app suite and the VPN and all of this, but then what happens next?
$12.99 a month, or $129 a year, right? So that's half the price of your Netflix subscription. If you're already using a VPN, we've got a VPN that's got 3 different protocols that it can operate on. So, look, it's we say this all the time. Like if it's free, you're the product, right? And we're deciding to say you're not the product. And so that means we have to have a product to sell you rather than you selling yourself or giving yourself up to be sold. There's going to be a subscription for our suites. We'll come out with new phones every couple of years, hoping people will like what they have, like what they see in terms of the enhancements that we get. But yeah, so it's, right now the phone is $989, and that comes with that first year of subscription, the $129 built in. You get the code at the time you buy it, and then the next year we'll ask you. We're also not going to auto renew you. We're going to ask you, do you want to be
cool?
Do you want to keep the apps? Do you want to keep the VPN? Do you want to keep the private messenger? Mm-hmm. But it costs money. There's engineers that have to put that together. There's hardware that we have to run it on. There's networking service that we have to have, and it's not free. And
do you think
we're not a nonprofit?
Do you think that's the new model now, is people willing to pay for their privacy?
So when I said earlier that if 5 years ago if Eric had asked me, I would have said no, and it was that I had seen several efforts where people had tried to put a model where people would pay for privacy, and they just didn't take. I feel like there is something different about right now. There is, it's being talked about a lot more. I think people are starting to understand just how unprivate having one of those in your pocket is.
Definitely. And when it comes to the operating system, you guys are doing these updates frequently. How reliable is it long term to keep up with that? Exactly. Yeah. I know you mentioned being in kind of quasi startup mode. Tell me about your team and how efficient are you guys at making sure that it doesn't just like not operate the next day.
Right.
Which, by the way, I love LibertOS and the play on words over in that. It's cool.
Yeah. Thanks. Well, look, our job is to provide a secure, convenient, privacy-focused cell phone, which is going to rely on having operating system up. So it's sort of core to our business model to like make sure we keep it up. There's 20 engineers about, and we're growing every week that do that. We've got an entire OS team only and the firmware team only. So there are a team of folks that are looking for it all the time. We're currently based on the Android 13 kernel. We're moving to the Android 14 kernel in 3 or 4 months. So yeah, we pay attention to all the security patches and all of them out there. And let's be real honest, there's some of the security patches we get from some of the big technology companies. They're preventing their competitors from doing things, but they're not preventing themselves from doing things. And they actually give access to more of your data, right? So I don't know if you saw the big kerfluffle about incognito mode on Chrome, right? So there's this whole mode on Chrome, incognito mode. All incognito mode means is it's not going to store anything on the computer you're using's history file. Like it's for when you're like when you go down to the hotel lobby and you need to print your boarding pass, you use incognito mode. But it's not sending anything else. All of your browsing information, all of the IPs that you're coming through, all of your networking traffic is all being collected and sent back to Google. So.
Wow. Yeah, it makes you think, like, because then it's everything, a lot of things are just like marketing strategies, you know, to make people feel like, hey, you know, you're in trustworthy hands. But then the more you dig into it, you realize that, you know, my fear is there's no way around it.
Yeah.
You know, and this is why I'm supportive of UpPhone and what you guys are doing. I think it's only going to improve with time. As well, not that there's anything to improve at this point, but
there is.
There's still.
Here's the CEO saying, "Oh boy, yeah, we do."
No, but you know what I mean. Like, I think, you know, in the face of a very complex regulatory environment and complex laws that mandate the availability of information from companies and all this other type of stuff, you know, it's a very delicate balance, I think, between running and operating a company and being able to also work within the confines of a regulatory landscape, and that's a huge challenge for anybody.
Yeah. I heard it was the CEO of Home Depot, speak at a conference once, and he talked about regulatory, like operating in a regulatory environment, and one of the things he said was, we can operate in any regulatory environment. We just need to know what it is, and we need to know that it's not going to change tomorrow, right? You know, business decisions are sometimes 5-year business decisions, and I think it's one of the issues that we've got here in our nation is the governing by executive order makes it very hard for somebody to know, okay, I just started a business, like we're 2 years into this, there's an election coming, that could change, and then like they just, first thing they do is cancel all of the executive orders from the other guy, and they put their own in, rather than working through the legislative process, so that then laws take longer to be changed. And great Saturday Night Live skit about executive orders. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I don't think so. I probably should.
The Schoolhouse Rock cartoon that was from when we were growing up.
I'm an executive order, and I pretty much just happened.
Yeah, it was very funny.
I'll definitely check it out, and I'll link to it if available. So another thing that I wanted to ask about is, you know, there are challengers that talk about, you know, the phone essentially being like a private label phone that's just been created in China. And I looked into it, and you're not made in China.
I talked earlier about the fact that like there have been some pokes at this attempt. Like people have been trying to get after this. How do we do a privacy thing? And there have been some others. I'm not going to name them. I'll leave them to the listener to go look up. But there have been folks that absolutely just bought the cheapest they could get working Android and just put a software solution on it, right? So we talked early on, if you're not controlling the hardware, your firmware, your operating system, and your application structure, there's just the surface area for attack on privacy and security is broad. We wanted to do a couple of different things. One was we wanted to keep the supply chain out of China, especially on all the
entirely.
There's probably some plastic pieces in here that, you know, some connectors or things like that might have come out of China. So I won't say 100% of all parts did not come out of China. The chipset's a Taiwanese chipset. The company's MTK, so your listeners can go check them out. We've kicked around the idea of a Qualcomm chip, and it's raised the price a bit. We're really trying to keep ourselves from a price point in a place that was competitive with what we're seeing coming out. Our manufacturing is done in Indonesia, 100%. So parts are procured, they all get shipped. The Indonesian team puts them together, does all the quality control checks and engineering. And again, I mean, you've got a phone. It doesn't feel like a cheap plastic phone, right? It's got some heft. It's got some heft to it.
I love this phone. So I'll take the case off because, you know, it changes the color, even though you guys almost got the color the same. But the color of this phone, I don't know why. Like I look at the aesthetics. First of all, the weight of the phone is awesome, but then this graphite color is just so nice. I love it.
Have you felt it? So,
and then, okay, I just want to show my iPhone. Okay, so I have 2 kids, they're young, and look what they've done to my screen.
Yeah.
Totally cracked. the fact that you guys have the Gorilla Glass like built into that, I was like, okay, good. Like it's made for moms.
The screen protector already on. So
yeah. Or a screen protector. I love it. I love the look and feel. For me, my only thing is like getting back into
Android.
Just using Android.
No, I hear you. I remember that when I went from BlackBerry and Windows to an iPhone world, I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
It was so hard. I had this cheat sheet that I carried with me. It's like, what is it on my Apple? And
everything is backwards,
back.
right? It's like literally. And then the same thing happened to me when I had to go back to Windows when I went back into corporate after doing Apple for so long, with everything. And it was just like, okay,
let me get your unlock it for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you set up the gesture mode instead of the. I'll be able to tell.
I have not. I haven't done very much yet. I played around. You know what I played around with is the Up Messenger, and I saw that you guys have these. It reminded me of like those old school Yahoo chat rooms.
Yeah.
It was like
intentional.
There's like different topics on there, and anybody can just kind of join in on that.
All right. So there's the gesture, so you can choose to do the 3-button navigation is what you currently have. Where's the other one?
Is that?
System navigation. Oh yeah. So you get the 3-button navigation. You can switch to gesture, which will feel more Apple-like.
Oh, okay. Put it on gesture if you're used to Apple. Okay, good to know. That's cool. That's like, I like that you built in the ease with that. Can't wait to use it and maybe like film some things off of it as well. Use the camera.
The camera's good.
Yeah, the camera's great. The Messenger. So you say it's like, completely secure.
There's some words I've tried to get my team to stop saying, and unhackable is one of them.
Okay. So can we talk about that?
Sure.
Because impenetrable, unhackable, I always worry about like using absolutes with anything.
You've had a couple of questions now that have probably come from very early articles that were sort of hit pieces because certain parts of the world hate Eric Prince, and all I have to say to them is you should meet the guy because he's freaking great. He's a great human. Anyway, and there was some language, right, and that they were wanting to use. And again, one of the reasons he came and asked me is I come from the industry, I'm in the world. My former company, IST Resaarch and the next one, 26 Technologies, work in this space a lot, and there are some very, very good hackers in that bunch, and they may or may not have had some of our early phones, and they may have done a full physical deconstruct of them, and so there is nothing. I would never say anything is unhackable, because the other thing is like these are human interaction machines, and the human is totally hackable.
Yeah.
Like most big hacks all come from
human error. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Targeted phishing. So the Messenger, we're built on an open source platform. The Messenger is built on an open source platform called Element. And so, there's been a lot of people like, you guys aren't open source. Well, we used open source protocols for the VPN. Element's an open source thing. We've added a few other components onto Element that allow us to get there. There's a new encryption key every time you make a call. So it's not reusing a pairing with, it had been the whole public and private key, and it used that same key every time you make a call. It's not the case. Ours changes every phone call you make. The Messenger also has a web version that allows you to do, we've tested 50 person video calls. It operates very thinly. And the other thing is, we're not backing up your keys. Like, you can back up your keys. We're not going to back them up. And we're not backing them up. We're not going to have them anytime they pass through our servers. They are, the key it's a big, huge crypto key. It's then also encrypted on top of that. So we've got no ability to get them back for you if you lose them. So we really encourage everybody to do the backup key thing.
Note to self.
Yep. Go
do the backup key. I've lost so many phones because of just, not being able to remember the passcode.
Well, and the issue is, right, so if you, and it's not a big deal because you can restart it, but so like I've got my Up phone, my iPad, my laptop, and so I've got sessions that go on all of those that are all, so I can be looking at them all, and they're unencrypted. But if you get logged out, if you log out, that session will become not encrypted anymore, and you'll lose all of those previous messages. You'll still get the ones that come in the future,
right?
And then so you have the ability to cross-verify between devices, right? So that's the thing. That's the easy button that most people will get, right? So if I have to log out of my phone for a reason, then I can cross-verify with the session I have on my laptop. Username and password goes in, cross-verify, all your messages decrypt. But if you really screw it up, or if you only have one device and you lose it, then all of those old messages you won't be able to recover them.
Gone. Yeah.
They're gone. A couple other things about the phone that I like. So we talked about the kill switch, right? This is a mechanical switch that separates the battery from all the compute, all the antennas, everything. I know a lot of people have started to carry Faraday-type bags. They'll throw their phone in the Faraday bag, their key fob. One's big enough for computers, especially when you're going across international borders. That is our Faraday bag. Like, you just put that button and your phone is off. There is a password protection to the messenger, so you can turn the messenger on, so you have to enter a password every time you open the messenger, and then once you set that, you can set up an auto wipe password. So 1 2 3 4, it unlocks your thing. 4 3 2 1 wipes all your messages. If you've been in a place where, the places that I have come where I would have really liked to have that is crossing the international border, and they're like, please unlock your phone.
Yeah.
Please unlock your messenger. And so what's coming in a newer version of the operating system is that same thing when you log into the phone. One passcode to unlock your phone, one password to factory reset your phone.
Wow, you guys really thought of everything.
I don't know if we've thought of everything. I'm continuing to think about things.
Oh, here's a scenario, let's find a solution around it.
Yep.
Clearly you've drawn from maybe some of your own scenarios where you would have liked to have that, as you just said. So let's talk a little bit about your company, IST Resaarch.
Sure.
Did you have more than one company?
So I started a company, left the Marine Corps, went to BAE Systems, lasted about 4 months there before I was like, nope, this is not for me. Started a consulting company. It became a company called the Previous Group. It was a partnership I had with 2 other guys. At some point in time, we decided the partnership wasn't for us, or I decided the partnership wasn't for me, and I left and started. Actually, they asked me to leave, but we're all back in good terms. I started IST Resaarch after that. And IST Resaarch sold in 2020.
Talk to me about, what was IST Resaarch, to the extent that you can talk about it?
Yeah.
What problem were you solving?
Yeah. So the 3 very distinct chapters of IST Resaarch, separated by near bankruptcies of the company in those chapters and a pivot. I was just watching something from Gary V, and he had a line that I really liked. It said, "Fall in love with failing, and that's the only way to success." And I'm like,
yeah, get comfortable with it.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I love that line.
Yeah, fall in love with failing.
Yeah.
So initially, I came out of DARPA. I had enough military operational experience, had a couple of math degrees, had sort of been in the high-tech world for a bit at the Marine Corps Warfighting Lab and DARPA. And I was looking for technically savvy military operators that could help solve problems in places. And, turns out there's gobs of companies that are collections of technically savvy military operators, and the competition is hard. We'd gotten up to about 40 people. And then there was a contract renegotiation, or contract re-up that recompeted, and we ended up on a losing end of that, and we were all tied up into one effort. And so, first lesson I learned in business was cash matters. And so the first consulting gig I took, had the contract, knew I was going to eventually get paid, but it was like 5 months before. It was a 5-month gap, no income came into my home.
That's tough.
I was not prepared for 5 months of no income. I had convinced my wife that it was going to be great. Look at these rates that I've gotten agreed to. This is going to be so much better than anything else. And she was not a woman that cursed much, but she called me from the gas station, and every credit card was maxed and every bank account was empty.
Oh,
She
no.
couldn't put gas to pick her kids up from school. And she's like, "Tell me how this is better, you asshole."
Oh, geez, that's rough.
And 4 days later, all the money came, right? And so I see lots of people that have, they come to me, they want to have startup coaching, and they've got all these beautiful PowerPoint slides. And this is my mission, this is my vision, this is what we're going to do here. And I'm like, "Where's your first 100,000? We're going to hire 10 people." I'm like, "Do you have any idea what it costs to have 10 people on your payroll?"
Oh, yeah, a lot.
A lot.
Yeah.
It's not 10 times the salaries there. It's a lot. And people just don't know. And if you start to get cash, if you start to not worry about your cash flow, you can find yourself very quickly in a place where it is gone and is not recoverable. There's a guy who was a former senior executive at Mantech told me, he's like, "Ryan, I do a cash call every Friday." Like, we're Mantech. Like,
Yeah.
every Friday I do a cash call.
Yeah.
To understand, like, what is our liquidity state? second lesson that I learned was after the first company, like beware of partnerships, specifically equal partnerships, where there's where it's not well defined how somebody can get in or out, and there's not specific roles and what's going to be a shareholder decision vice an operational decision. And anyhow, all lessons, and my former business partners there, I think they would agree, right? Those are lessons we all learned and adjusted off of that. So now IST Research gets born. We're working for JIDO COIC, so the Counter ID Operations Integration Center, specifically because they wanted to use a piece of technology in the system or in their organization that was a program that I was the program manager of at DARPA. So I just came in as a consultant for that project, and then that organization was growing, and there was an opportunity to grow, and so we added some people. But all eggs in one basket, it's very tough.
It is tough. Yeah.
So
but those moments that you talk about are really the ones that make your life story as well, because it's like that just waiting for that paycheck, for 5 months, or that's very difficult. But then you're resilient. You find a way to get through it, and then success comes after that. So do you where does that resilience come from? Do you think it's learned?
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from. I think for me, the early part of that, call it grit, call it resilience, came from many, many years of wrestling. And so I wrestled from 6th grade through college, and shout out to all my fellow wrestlers out there. You'll know what I mean. It is 100% on you in that match. How much work did you do before?
Yeah.
Where can you recover from if you make a mistake on the mat? How do you get back in it? It's not over until that last horn blows. But I think that, I would say the time in the Marine Corps also got there. And I've just always had also a very independent mindset. I became a Marine Corps tanker. There were not many Marine Corps tankers, and I chose that. I got an opportunity to go on one of the Marine Expeditionary Units. Not many tankers have gone on Marine Expeditionary Units. Anyway, so there's a lot of those things, and I don't know where the resilience comes from, because there were times when there was nothing left to be resilient about. The next cash thing came when we added 5 people to this company, and we were again having delays getting paid. And I distinctly remember this, curling up behind the couch on the floor in the fetal position, because I had to make payroll or not make payroll the next day, and there was no money coming in that day. And my father was living in my basement at the time, and I walked down and said, I need $40,000 tomorrow. And he wrote me the check. Right. And so we talked earlier about, even when you're grown adults, sometimes you have to go rely on your parents. And he wrote me that check. Again, I was able to pay him back quickly. But yeah, I don't know where the resilience comes from. I'm pretty stubborn. I'm not willing to admit defeat often, but there are some times when you got to go, I'm not going to win that battle and back away from it. You also have to realize when to do that. So that was chapter 1. We lost all that stuff. Chapter 2 was us, very deliberately putting together very small, contract research and development projects. So into the small business innovative world, little small projects with DARPA, ONR, and other projects, right? There was 8 to 10 of us. It was a slog, because, the effort to get a $90,000 contract is the equivalent effort of getting a $25 million contract, right? The amount of effort you got to put in to do that. So it can really get there. And then we felt like we were starting to get some momentum. We had been talking to private equity investors about potentially investing in us. And then we had 6 things that were supposed to start in the spring. And I know you've worked in and around the federal government before. Those funding timelines for the small businesses that are relying on them don't always equate to the timelines of the federal government. And it was delayed. We got to a place, and then my business manager at the time calls me. He's like, man, I do not see how we get through September. And so, I pulled everybody in and said, look, I saw a pathway to December. I did not have a pathway past December. And so in September, I sat everybody down and said, look, I do not see employment. It is September, and the last thing I want to do is be laying people off at Christmas. So I'm telling you all now, I've got you covered until December. Let's put consulting agreements in place. You should be going out and looking for your next gig. Because at that point, I was getting pretty tired.
Wow, Ryan, but you're taking care of your people, like that. I feel like that makes a really good leader, is like the ability to just like introspect and like, look at where you are and, really care for your team and your people that are making it possible. So that's good on you.
One of the guys from San Francisco asked his friend from San Francisco, he's like, hey, I know people that just got this, and like not only did they not get paid, they didn't get the last 2 weeks worth of pay. Is that what's happening here? And my friend Todd was like, no, man, the exact opposite's happening here. Mm-hmm. Right. And then like I'm walking across the street, I run to a program manager that I knew from DARPA. And he was like, Ryan, I'm really glad I just bumped into you. We've got a project that's behind on execution, and for the federal government, just like he hadn't spent his money enough. He's like, do you guys have any capacity right now to take on about $200,000 worth of work? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me get back with the team, and I'll get back with you. And then I called him like, you're not gonna believe what happened.
That's great.
That's what like broke the dam. And then like the next ones came up, and we were like, oh, whew. So when I talk about near bankruptcy, right? Those are those 2 times, and then from there we got into a really good groove. We started creating some technology. And then at one point in time, we decided we were going to stop going after the contract research and development as prime contractors, because we had a vision for a platform called Pulse that we wanted to build, and we would try to find projects that seemed to be well aligned with Pulse and the kinds of technology we wanted to build. And they just sometimes, like the program manager, and again, the government program manager is totally his prerogative. He's like, no, I've got this program, and like I know you guys sort of want to go a little bit that way, but I need you over here. And we took some outside capital investment from Blue Delta Capital Partners, Kevin Robbins and Mark Franz. And, I had so many fellow entrepreneurs that said, don't take the money. Don't take the private equity. You're going to lose control. And I found Kevin and Mark. We personally liked each other. They had an investment thesis, which was they wanted only minority investments, only owner-operated companies in the federal tech sector. And I was like, that's a pretty specific thesis. And for them, it makes their decision process easy. Is it in that bucket? We'll continue the conversation. Is it not in that bucket? Like, good luck, but like, you're just not going to fit us. And so they came in. I can't remember all the total dollars, but it was $5-ish million got dropped on my top line to build the company. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, finally made it.
Yeah. This
was November. We finally made it. So we're like, and my business manager at the time said, I just keep refreshing the bank account screen and laughing. And so we're like, oh, great. Like, here's all these great people we wanted to hire, and we started to hire them. And, then we're at a board meeting, and Kevin's like, hey, man, the burn rate's sort of high. And I'm like, yeah, this is coming, and this is coming, and this is coming, and this is coming. And less than 9 months after taking that investment, I had to lay off 25 people.
Oh, shoot. Yikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to watch out to that burn rate.
It was not good. Yeah. It was not. And again, fall in love with failing, lessons learned. I still think we did that well, not the way we wanted it to go. And like every board member called me and they said, there is often a serious leaning of a company, like dropping it down, making it lean right before it explodes. Don't give up hope. And so, just having people like that around you and part of your advisory team is important. So.
That's great. So inevitably you end up building up IST Research to the point where Carlyle Group acquires it along with 26 Labs.
Correct.
But you created then 26 Technologies. So can you talk a little about that process of like what goes into that, and the fact that Carlyle bought it, I think is like, that's so cool. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Everyone, a lot of people in building a company, that's, their ultimate goal is like, selling it or getting acquired. Personally, like that's never been something that's been a driver for me. And I wonder, like, was it ever for you?
I surely didn't start IST Research thinking, here's what I'm going to do. And part of it was, when you start companies and you're a CEO and you're in places, you start talking to other CEOs and you're like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Huh. And I'd actually had my first tour at DARPA. I was running a program called the Command Post of the Future, and it became a large program. It transitioned. It went to Iraq, became the command and control platform for the divisions in Iraq. And it was a big enough program, but all of the performers on the program were small business owners. So it was big enough that like me, the program manager, had personal relationships and frequent calls with this team of CEOs. And then we would go to big exercises and we'd go to things and the CEOs would all show up. And then we'd go out and have dinner and I learned their stories, right? Former professors, guys that had been in big business, people that were on their third business. And you just get to have those conversations. And it's the thing you do, the thing that happens when you give yourself time to break bread with the folks you work with, that you start to learn some stories and people start to give back and forth to each other, and you find those folks come and go out of your life over and over and over again. So the process was interesting. So once I decided to bring on the private equity fund, that became the goal of the company. We were going to build it at a point when then that private equity group would get their money back and a return, right? And so we had said as a company. So after we had to lay 25 people off after the investment, right? I just instituted we're going to have a full financial briefing to the entire company every month on the first Thursday of the month. Every month, here's the books, here they are. Come and ask questions. Distill it down to slides, of course. Anybody could come and take a look at any transaction that they wanted to. So we started doing that, and in that goal, we then got to this goal for 2020, where we wanted 2020 in 2020. So $20 million in revenue, 20% profit in the year 2020. And I remember my executive leadership team, so my COO, Amy Dalton, my executive VP, Carrick Longley, and my CTO, Madison Bamer, we put it up on the board and we're like, well, that's a catchy thing. That's catchy. It'll be easy to remember, draw people's attention that we're interested in revenue and profit, and 2020 is coming up, this best year ever. But then we were all laughing at ourselves saying, there's no way we're going to hit those numbers, right? We wanted that to be a little bit aspirational. And then we ended up blowing the numbers out of the water. But so we got there, right? And then we started talking like that, and the team knew. And I said, one of our goals is we're going to grow by mergers or acquisitions. We're going to grow this company. Whether we're buying a company, whether we're being bought, whether we're merging with equals, we're going to do that. And the whole company knew it. It was on there, and we gave a report every month. Where are we on the 7 goals? So 2020 starts, we end up with a $10 million or $100 million 10-year contract with the Department of State. And I had been working with a couple of different folks that do the brokering of these deals, right? And so I met Andy McEnroe and Sam Manis from Raymond James, and we had done some meetings. They had done some research for me. They had provided me some companies, and I called them. I said, so this 10-year, $100 million contract, this is the time to put ourselves out there. And they were like, this is exactly the time to put yourself out there at the start of something like this. And so we started the process, and they led it for us. They talked through it. It was a full process. We got put in front of a bunch of different people. One of the companies that we briefed was Novetta, who at the time the CEO was Tiffany Gates. And so Novetta was one of them. The CEO was Tiffany Gates, and the CFO was Rich Sawchuk. I was really interested in them. They had been, Tiffany had been there for 7 years. They'd acquired a bunch of companies, and they were getting ready for an exit. And Carlyle was their private equity backer. And so I'd already met some of the Carlyle team. And then, so we're going, we get a few offers to come in. We're trying to figure out what to do. I was like a poor kid from Manassas, and so some of the numbers that were coming my way, I was like, what? What? And then at the end of it, we're almost there getting ready to make a decision, and then Carlyle raises his hand and says, hey, we're not going to let you take the Novetta deal. We want to talk to you about something else. And then they came in and said they had a CEO and an operating executive that they'd already decided on. And they're like, we want you to meet this guy, Joe Logue. And so Joe had run 2/3 of Booz Allen Hamilton, all of their defense and intelligence work. And he had heard or seen one of our briefs and gotten some feedback from Carlyle, and then he showed me this business plan that he had put together, and it was so well aligned with things, all the words that we had said. And so they decided to buy us as the first peg in what they're doing. And so, so us, the 26 labs, and there's other company since. I was in September. We were already talking to 26 Labs right before. And 26 and I, their former CEO, Chris Grimo, and I had met, and we were talking about the mergers of equals. Like, do we push us together now, us decide to do it, grow it for another 3 years, and then go on? But yeah, Carlyle came in and said, we would like to do this, and they put an offer in place and closed within 30 days.
Wow, that's great.
I mean, it was an intense 30 days.
Well, that's Carlyle Group for you.
It was great. It was the best offer by price. They were just getting something started. I was keenly interested in learning from that process, and so I now still get to sit as a senior advisor. We got a board meeting tomorrow.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. So then, like, when you sell, like, I'm sure, like, the adrenaline is, just like rushing through you. But then it's that, right after the sale, what's that feeling? It's probably very bittersweet.
So, yeah, it is.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So Dane Baird is the managing director at Carlyle that we worked with, and he called me one time, and I think he could tell I was like, he's like, hey, I need you to know this is gonna suck for a few weeks. We're committed to do this deal. We've got to do proper diligence. He said, but there's going to be a moment that happens at the closing call when it just feels like all this stress just falls off of your back, and you're like, whew. He said, and then there's going to be this other feeling as the guy who just sold his company that he started. That's going to be a different feeling. And so, we go through the diligence. It's like 3:00 in the morning. The morning we're supposed to have the lawyerly call, and I'm like, well, I got to be at my office at my conference table, looking sporty for this call. And, I thought there was going to be a little bit of fanfare and all this stuff. And, it's like, do we have all the lawyers from the IST side? Do we have all the lawyers from the Carlyle side? Has everybody's conditions been met? Are all the signature pages collected? Yes. Okay, release the signatures. The deal is closed. Thanks, everybody. And they hung up. It was like 15 minutes. And I was like, oh. And then I walked down to the river in Fredericksburg where my office was, and I freaking wept. And it was this mixed emotion of, man, I'm glad that's over. Holy cow, that's a lot of money. Damn, I just gave it up. I just gave my baby up.
It's like you built it up.
Yeah. And so Amy Dalton was my COO, and we sort of we left Carrick and Madison in charge of running the company and continuing to grow it. Amy and I took the burden of all the merger talks. And I left my phone at the office and walked away, and then she lost her stuff in her basement, and then she was trying to call me, and I wasn't answering. And she's like, what is going on? And we were both having the exact same moment of, it's that relief of, you get weepy. One, you're just like, whew, that's over. But the other's like, everything's going to change now. And it did. It did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found out a year in I don't think I'm cut out to be operating like that. I'd been the CEO calling all the shots. I was no longer the CEO. And so I decided to step away about a year into it and stick around on the board.
What role, other than a board position, what role
I was the chief growth officer for that year.
Is that typical that?
No, there's usually some sieve, at least for the first couple of pegs. Yeah. I think for me, the chief growth officer was probably not the right role, because I wanted to do both growth and have a hand in sort of what our technical architecture looked like. And I don't know if a strategy officer, anyway, hindsight's whatever. The company's doing great. There's that meme of knowing everything falls apart when you leave. Now that's not the case I'm having. I show up every board meeting and go, wow.
You guys really did something with this one.
They did. Yeah.
That's good.
It's almost 900 people now. So
900.
900.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And when you left, it was what?
350. When I sold, IST we were probably 125 people at that time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so, do you sit on any other boards right now?
I do. So I'm on the board of Unplugged, and I'm also in the board. Actually, the gentleman that was the chairman of my board at IST Resaarch called me, and he'd spent a lot of time sitting on proxy boards, so foreign-owned companies that then have classified work in the United States. They put a board of cleared professionals in between those two. And so there's a signature management reduction company, so camouflage, heat signature reduction called Ametrine. And it's an Israeli-based company, and Israeli-based company with a U.S. subsidiary that does a lot of work for SOCOM and others. So, so now oddly, and also not a thing I planned, I find myself sitting on boards and working closely with two different Israeli companies in two very different technical domains.
Interesting. How is it the difference, or is there even a difference with like the cultural side of doing business?
It's a huge cultural. It's not a huge cultural divide, and I guess that's the thing, right? It doesn't feel like it's a huge cultural divide, but there are some very specific things in there that, that at least my leadership team on Unplugged, we have to remind ourselves over and over, like, same team, different cultures.
Can you share what some of those would be?
Yeah, sure. So one of them is sort of the openness and communications with the whole team, right? So I am a big proponent of bad news does not get better over time, right? And so I'll go back to the process of the merger, right? So everybody in the industry told me, do not tell your employees that you're going through this process. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, too bad, we've been talking about it for 2 years. Like, I'm not going to then enter the process. Like, it's been a corporate goal for 2 years. I'm not going to enter the process and not tell my team. They're like, people will start leaving. People will start leaving. Like, people, like they're going to notice that I'm not up at the customer sites anymore. They're going to notice that I'm having all these strange meetings with these things. They can see my calendar, right? It's like I did not want to get into a place where, like, I didn't put things on my calendar.
Yeah.
And so, like, we gave people updates on the process every month along the way.
Yeah.
And then so when we left, or when we closed, we got to celebrate. And too bad it was COVID, because I would have thrown a heck of a party, and we couldn't. But yeah, we eventually lost some folks. Some folks started seeing we get merged in. They're like, no, this isn't the culture I want anymore. And they decided to move on and do other things. But nobody was surprised the day after, and that is not the case for lots of companies that go through this process. Like, they're working along thinking they're a thing, and then they next morning make this announcement like, we're now part of this. Mm-hmm. And so, and again, these are my lessons learned, but I'm about sharing more, not less, and with a team that's going through hard stuff. So that's one. I also had a structure that was way flatter, and like we gave everybody permission to sort of talk throughout nobody had to, like, from this division had to go all the way up and back down to talk to somebody. And we'd field questions from anybody every month. Any question, anytime. Your boss doesn't get to approve those questions. And so that's some of the friction. That's one very specific idea of that.
I feel like that's like a trait of a good leader, though, is that level of transparency and building the trust with your team. Not everybody has that.
Yeah.
Like, irregardless of where you're sitting at geographically, it's just sort of something that either someone has that mindset or not.
Yeah.
And I've found, certainly working for people like you in the past, that you want to see them succeed.
Yeah.
I was curious about, like, what are some integral moments? I know you mentioned that you joined the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. What are some integral moments in your life that helped shape your worldview? What also led you to join the Marine Corps? Is that something like, a tradition that runs in your family, or? Well,
so I think my dad did a couple of years in the National Guard, but no, it wasn't like we didn't have big, deep, always been veterans. Probably one of the, so my parents split up when I was 5, and like really deeply missed that, like, coach dad thing. And so, when I started wrestling, again, I was also a scrawny, buck-toothed kid. I mean, I think I weighed 90 pounds in the 8th grade. And so, like, I played football, but it really hurt when you got hit by a guy. And so, I found wrestling and like-sized individuals. All About You. I sort of sucked at all the sports that included ball, hand-eye coordination and balls, and so wrestling became a thing. Having two older brothers, sort of wrestle, period. And so it became a big thing, and I found that those coaches in my life were pretty instrumental in a couple of things, and I screwed some crap up, right? So senior year, captain of the team, it's preseason. A couple of the younger guys want to go up and go to the football game with us. I've got a fake ID. I stop and buy some beer. We're listening to finishing up a song while we finish our beer before we go into the game, and a sheriff comes up and knocks on the window.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so I was seen as a leader in my high school, and I had just done the most unleaderly thing ever, and I had a coach that it was great. He was really pissed. They suspended me for the first 10 matches of the year, and it was not pleasant. But the way he handled that, I thought was great. So those were some moments of leadership that I saw, and were instrumental. I had a guy that was my boss at the pizza delivery place I worked at in college, and I came in one day and had some significant visible injuries, and it had been a wild night at the fraternity house, and things got out of hand, and Dave was also like, you're a smart kid. You're gonna kill yourself. Get your stuff together,
Get
Ryan.
your act together.
Get your stuff together. Yeah. So anyway, and then I barely made it out of college. I was pretty close to failing out of college. Yeah.
Wow. But then you pursued mathematics.
So
what's going on
my
there?
bachelor's degree in mathematics was because I was failing out. I was really struggling. I was an aerospace engineer. Was my start. I thought I was going to be working at Boeing, and turns out I'm glad that I'm not working at Boeing as an engineer right now. Anyway, so I thought I was going to do something like that. Got 2.5 years into it and was like, I am not going to make it through this program. And so I, got with my counselor, tried to figure some stuff out, and they're like, well, you got a lot of math prerequisites done, and so I went math education. I thought I was going to be a high school math teacher and a wrestling coach. That's totally what I thought I was going to do.
Wow.
And so both of my brothers had gone a pathway into the military. Ross he was an Army ROTC cadet. Bruce did the PLC program in the Marine Corps. So he enlisted first and then went to college, did the PLC program. So they were both military officers. And so I signed up about 2.5 years in. I'm like, well, this whole college performance thing is not going to earn me any jobs, so I better have another pathway for a job. And so, when you come into the military services through one of their commissioning programs, the requirement is a degree. The requirement isn't a specific kind of degree, and the requirement isn't a grade point average. You've got to have a degree. You have to get through the application process and get selected. So that was, that was school for me, right? And then got commissioned. And then started my Marine Corps time, and it's good. I found myself back in a place where, my performance and my success, at least in those early schools, was 100% on my shoulders, but it was back to some, included some physicality and things, which was better than just classroom work, and I enjoyed that. I did get a sense pretty early on that, 20 years in the Marine Corps was not going to be for me. And part of that comes from how the Marine Corps promotes and compensates people, right? So the best and the worst captain in the Marine Corps get promoted most of the time along the same lines, and they always get paid the same thing. And I had a situation that I was working in where millions of dollars of equipment went missing. I was tapped to be the investigating officer, put my things back, and I said, the officer that's in charge of that unit should be held accountable for this. They didn't hold him accountable. They then took the staff NCO, that was his supply sergeant,
and
held him accountable.
Oh.
And wrote a bad piece of paper that was it for him, I think, in terms of, a next promotion or anything. And then a month or two later, it was time for this guy to move on to his next thing. And the same guy that appointed me as the investigating officer asked me to write him an award. And I was like, sorry, Colonel.
You can't play the politics.
I'm sorry, Colonel. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Just the politics, and the military is not a meritocracy. The best people don't get the best things. Anyhow, and then, I sort of found later on that there's a whole group of people that chose to serve, served well, and they get out between 8 and 12 years because they're all sort of frustrated with what they see there. It really has nothing to do with performance, but everything to do with being a good rule follower, which is, again, why I sucked as a student. I was not a good rule follower at all. And so I've just found some of the best teammates to be folks that served in the military, got out at 8 to 12 years, whether they were an officer or non-commissioned officer, doesn't really matter. They end up being great teammates because they were just sort of a little bit frustrated. Yeah. I also found this about interns. I found something about interns. I wanted interns that were going to graduate in 3.5 years or 5.5 years, right? So, 5.5 years, something probably happened. Loss of a job, loss of a family member, ran out of money, maybe even an arrest, right? And so you can see them during that period overcoming adversity somewhere along the way. They probably had to work their way through school. And so I just found people, I found people that just go to school and get the 4-year degree have not overcome much adversity at all. And they haven't solved problems, right? I also look for that, like, what did you do on your summer jobs? Like, a lot of them would go get these, what they thought were highfalutin interns, right? And this one kid that I loved, he's like, I started my own landscaping firm. And that's what I did every summer. Like, I'd come home from college, and that's what I did. There were 40 people that worked for me, and,
cool.
He bought all this equipment. I'm like,
yes, come work for me.
with, work with.
Yeah. Yes, with. Good point. There's that leadership coming through again. No, I love that. I really do. And then, you're kind of just built for small business and maybe not small business, but, like, you're built for startups.
I think that's the thing I learned in that year after the Carlyle transitions. We started to add all these people. I realized I have no ability to know all of these people, and that was an uncomfortable thing for me. And, so, yes, I do like the small teams that, I think I'll be in that less than 100. I really want to get not being dad and go back to being fun uncle and just have small projects along the way and not be running a main thing.
Right now with Unplugged, like, how big do you see the team getting, like, now with the launch and everything?
Yeah.
I know you guys have mentioned you're not going to go public.
We're not.
Okay, so that's like part of your ethos is to.
We're not going to go public, and we probably won't. We could find a like-minded person that wanted to come acquire us, but all of the founders have a very serious, and again, I'm not a founder. That came in after the fact. All the founders have a very serious mindset of, like, this is more than just building technology for technology's sake. There's a little bit of a mission.
Right.
There's a little bit of a movement here and what they're trying to do. And look, I don't know how big. We get indications sometimes that it could go really big, really fast. Yeah. I get very uncomfortable with big and fat. Going big fast. Too fast, right? Too fast means you're not doing something well.
Yeah.
Right. So you can have it good, big, or fast, and you can't have it. Right? You can't have it. You can have two of those. You cannot have all three of them.
So you're only selling in the U.S. right now. Do you
we're about to announce Canada soon.
Okay, cool.
And then the European Union. So we're getting ready to start. So in the next 3 months, you need to get a CE certification in Europe, and then we've got. I've received notes from people in Australia and New Zealand and South Africa and South America and all over the world saying, when can I get one? And so I've got a global network of folks. I've been sending them out to those people to put a SIM card in, test them out. Do they work on all the networks?
That's great. I really love that you guys created something that is going to challenge the status quo. It's like you said earlier, it's not easy to build the hardware, but you guys managed to do it, and you're running it great. You managed to deliver your first batch of 10,000 phones onto more now, potentially new geographies. I think it's great. I personally, like, as an end user, I love that you've gotten this out there. And one thing I notice about people all the time is, like, they just love to complain, like, oh Apple sucks or Google sucks and, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but what are you going to do about it? And you've actually done something about it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's, like I said, there's plenty of people that complain about it, and then they go do something organically for them.
Yeah.
But it is not a thing. It is not a thing. My uncle could do. He couldn't do those things,
Yeah.
right? And so, trying to get some of those steps up to a place where it does get convenient for an average user to take some control of themselves.
Yeah, that's really ultimately what we're all after, is being able to, manage our own information, our own privacy. And personally, I would spend $130 a year to maintain that privacy. I can't wait to see where you guys take this to in the next
Awesome.
steps. I appreciate so much that you have come onto the podcast. Do you have any pieces of advice that you would give to parents in particular in terms of how to take the lead? Because you are a leader and you are a parent. How would parents be able to take the lead in helping secure their children's futures in this rapidly changing landscape of AI and more data? There's so much hunger for data still.
Yeah.
So what do we do?
Well, other than the obvious plug of sell them one of my phones, I think it's important to talk with kids through the full aspect of what privacy means and the threats to their privacy, right? And the freaking peer pressure thing that happens in high school is no joke. The need to be a thing, get a like, get on social media, watch all these other things. It is no joke in crushing the mental health of our teenagers. So that's one thing is, man, are there places and opportunities to get away from those kinds of things? One of the things right now that I'm really digging in on is this national movement that says everybody must go to college, and I saw it in my son. He went to school. He was studying to become a pilot, a commercial pilot. And 5 weeks into school, he called me at 3:00 in the morning. And when your kid's not with you, and it's a Wednesday, and it's 3:00 in the morning, you look at that phone, you're like, this is probably not going to be good.
Yeah.
And he just said, you need to come get me because I am just going to waste your money here. And he needed 3 more years to grow up. He decided to enlist in the Army. I get to see him at graduation this Friday from a special school. And I think this idea of one size fits all, and there's a single pathway to take kids from point A to point B, is killing our kids. I think it's killing our kids. I know it's killing our kids. I know they're taking their own lives. The combination of that and sort of the social pressures from social media and others, I think it's continuous discussion and dialogue, and not grounding and taking devices away. And I know that from the years of 13 to 17, a dad can't tell a daughter anything. I know that from experience. It's not exactly true. My daughter continued that time to engage and ask me questions, but they surely didn't want to hear lectures, right? And so you're finding a way to do it in ways that are not lecturing are important. But I'll say, man, let your kid be your kid. Mm-hmm. Let them be a kid. They're going to then become adults, and then let them be an adult, right? So we have this thing about leadership where, I want to be out front knocking down obstacles for the team I'm leading, but then I want to get out of the way and just be behind them and make sure they have resources, right? And so because you've got to let your team run into some obstacles because they've got to learn to love failing. And same with kids. They've got to understand that a failure at 18 is not the thing that they're going to be still dealing with when they're 40, usually, right? And recovering from that failure is really good. Gary Vee said it the other day too. He's like, man, at 18 you could go do anything and you're still a kid, and you've got a chance to go get a regular job if that's what you need to do. Well,
that's very helpful advice, and from the heart. So I appreciate again so much that you're on the podcast.
Thanks
and thanks for your
me.
time today.
All right, great.
Good luck with everything.